Very good. And finally, we have arrived to the fifth session of targeting and position. Let me remind you or refresh you about the marketing process that we have been walking through. We've just spent quite a bit of time on the methodology for segmentation and segmentation bases and fundamentals. But the ultimate aim of segmentation is to be able to choose the target market or the target markets where the firm will have the highest probability of achieving its objectives. So let me briefly remind you as to what should be the nature or the characteristics of what those target segments should at the very end look like. First and foremost, they need to be based on value. Segments should eventually be able to perceive the value proposition as a very distinctive and unique value proposition, and at the same time, segments possess different economic value for the firm. So value is the key concept of how should I go about thinking about how to make up or compose segments. In addition, they need to be sufficiently relevant and simple to understand, sufficiently large to be able to be of interest to the firm, to be able to achieve its financial objectives, profitability objectives, but they might also be relatively simple and easy to understand because eventually they need to be targeted and reached. If they're not simple enough, it essentially becomes a useless sort of type of segmentation. They also need to be reachable. You should be able to design different strategies and tactics, such as the marketing mix, the pricing, the products, and the right communication channels to effectively address them. And last but not least, they need to be differential. They need to be homogeneous or very similar within the group, but they need to be sufficiently different from people that are left outside the target segment. So in other words, they have to be able to respond differently to distinct commercial offers. So does that mean that a firm cannot serve more than one target segment? Typically speaking, it's good to concentrate resources. It is impossible to try to shoot for everyone, as most likely you're not going to hit anyone, as a famous phrase used to say. However, that does not mean that a firm cannot be successful at serving more than one target segment. For example, let's look at the case of a theme park. In this particular case is one called PortAventura, about 150 kilometers south of Barcelona, here in the city of Tarragona. Look at this. PortAventura has identified at the very minimum 3 different kinds of customers that they can serve well. First and foremost, is those families that live around the park, that most likely have already been to the park. And so they only really have a really low valuation, in this case, only 1 out of 5 for the experience of revisiting the park. What kind of programs would you have offered to be able to get a little bit more value from these kind of segments living perhaps 100 or 150 or 200 kilometers away from the park? On the other hand, you might have identified a group of teenagers or young travelers that only come to spend some time for a couple of weeks, maybe 3 weeks in the beaches around Tarragona. These guys are looking for an alternative way of entertainment for some of the days in which they're going to be spending in the south of Catalonia. So perhaps they will have a higher valuation for or appeal for the value proposition of the PortAventura Park for the time in which they're spending in the beach. Perhaps these folks value the experience of the park on a 3 out of 5. But at the same time, there is a separate group of customers, let's say travelers from the UK, which have many different alternative forms of entertainment. They could be spending a weekend in Paris, even in Disney, perhaps. They could be going to visiting the Colosseum and some of the monuments in Rome, or alternatively, they can fly all the way to Tarragona to have spend a weekend at the PortAventura. So for these folks, the valuation of that experience might be extremely high, perhaps a 5 out of 5. So what kind of product offers, even though you have the same assets, essentially the theme park, will you design for each one of these customers? Here's an example. For example, for the first set of customers, the ones that live in the vicinity of the park, you can either target kids or you can target parents and perhaps offer a buy one, get one free type of offer to entice these people to revisit you again. At the same time, perhaps the best way to serve the second group of consumers, it's simply by generating enough knowledge. How would you go about doing that? You guessed right. All you have to do is talk to the people in the front lobby of the hotels and be able to leave pamphlets or passes or coupons to make sure that if you are within 50 or 60 kilometers around the vicinity of the park, that this becomes a viable alternative for where to spend 1 or 2 days out of the 2-week vacations that perhaps you will be spending in the beaches of southern Catalonia. And last but not least, for the last set of customers, perhaps you don't need to be the intermediary, but you need to find a tour operator that will sell the entire package. The plane tickets, the hotel stay, perhaps the car rental, and everything in one package to make this experience as complete as possible. So as you can see, there is 3 different distinct sort of customers, all with different valuations for attending 1 or 2 days the park, but nevertheless, a theme park can target all of them.